The holographic display flickered as Commander Elena Reyes studied the unknown vessel hovering just beyond Neptune's orbit. Its whole configuration defied Earth's classification systems, all smooth curves and iridescent material that seemed to absorb rather than reflect light. "Anything from the signal team?" she asked, her voice steady despite the historical weight of the moment. Lieutenant Davis shook his head. "No response to standard greeting protocols, Commander. But they're definitely scanning us. Our sensors are being probed extensively." The bridge of the ESS Harbinger fell silent. As humanity's most advanced vessel, it represented the culmination of a century of rapid technological advancement following the climate wars. Still, Reyes harbored no illusions about their readiness for this encounter. "They're opening a channel," Davis announced, his fingers dancing across his console. The central display transformed, revealing a tall, slender figure with opalescent skin and 4 independently moving eyes. Its mouth didn't move when the translation came through. "Greetings, Terrans. I am Emissary Zex Vueler of the Galactic Confederation. We have been observing your development with interest." Reyes straightened her uniform. "I am Commander Elena Reyes of the Earth Space Force. We welcome peaceful contact." Dr. Quaim O.C., standing quietly at the science station, frowned as his instruments captured the aliens' untranslated communication frequencies. Something about the harmonic patterns seemed discordant. The aliens' 4 eyes blinked in unsettling sequence. "Your species has progressed remarkably quickly. The Confederation oversees 17 spacefaring civilizations. We offer guidance to emerging species such as yours." "We appreciate your offer," Reyes replied carefully. "We're eager to learn about galactic society." While the formal exchange continued, O.C. isolated the alien communication frequencies, feeding them through his experimental translation algorithm, designed to capture emotional and contextual meaning rather than just words. What emerged chilled him to the bone. Harvesting potential exceeds expectations. Genetic diversity optimal for labor adaptation. Minimize resistance by appealing to their primitive hierarchical instincts. O.C. slid his findings to Reyes's console. Her expression remained neutral as she read, but her knuckles whitened around the edge of her chair. "We would be honored to visit your vessel," Reyes said smoothly. "Our protocols permit a delegation of 5 representatives." As the delegation prepared for transport, Reyes gathered her team in the secure briefing room. "This isn't first contact," she said bluntly. "It's first conquest. Dr. O.C.'s translation suggests they see us as resources, not equals." Major Zhang Wei, the tactical specialist, reviewed the sensor data. "Their weapon signatures are beyond our classification system, Commander. A direct confrontation would be suicide." "Then we don't confront them directly," Reyes said, her mind racing through scenarios. "We need leverage." 30 minutes later, the human delegation materialized aboard the alien vessel. The interior was a disorienting blend of organic and technological elements, walls pulsing with what appeared to be circulatory systems carrying luminescent fluid. "Your civilization will benefit greatly under Confederation guidance." Emissary Zex Vueler gestured with an elongated limb. "Many species require centuries of supervision before being considered for probationary membership." Reyes smiled diplomatically while Zhang subtly mapped the vessel's layout, and Osai continued monitoring their true communications. "And what would this supervision entail?" Reyes asked. "Population management, resource allocation, cultural adjustment." The alien's translator produced the words smoothly, but Osei's device captured the underlying message. "Processing facilities established within 1 orbital cycle." Reyes locked eyes with the emissary. "I believe there's been a misunderstanding about humanity's place in the cosmos." She tapped her communication band 3 times. The signal to the Harbinger. Immediately, the lights on the alien vessel flickered as the human ship executed a precisely calculated nuclear pulse, creating an electromagnetic surge that washed through the alien systems. The emissary's translator failed mid-threat, as emergency symbols flashed across the walls. "Let me clarify our position," Reyes said, though she knew the alien couldn't understand her words. The power move was what mattered now. Humanity isn't seeking supervision. We're seeking partnership, equals, or nothing. 3 weeks after the standoff, the Confederation diplomatic vessel Eternal Harmony entered Earth orbit with considerably more respect than their first encounter. Commander Rice watched from the Jakarta space elevator as the pearlescent ship descended through the clouds, a spectacle broadcast to billions worldwide. "They're bringing their full diplomatic corps," Major Jong whispered, scanning his tablet, "including representatives from at least 5 member species we haven't seen before." "Good," Rice nodded. "More eyes watching means less chance they'll try something overtly hostile." The reception at the United Earth Council headquarters in Singapore featured calculated opulence, enough to demonstrate humanity's capabilities without revealing their true technological extent. Earth's leaders had unanimously approved Rice's strategy: appear confident but technologically dependent. Ambassador Thexnar, the Confederation's chief diplomat, towered over the human delegation. Unlike the first contact team, these aliens made no attempt to hide their disdain. "The qualification trials have existed for 12 millennia," Thexnar explained, mandibles clicking between translated words. "No species has ever attempted them with less than 1,000 years of interstellar capability." "Then we'll be making history," Rice replied with a practiced smile. Later that night, Mateo Hernandez slipped through the embassy gardens where the alien delegation was quartered. His neural implant, disguised as a hearing aid, captured their encrypted communications as they believed themselves unobserved. In the secure briefing room beneath the council building, Hernandez played back his findings. "They're cataloging everything," he explained, face drawn. "Defense systems, resource centers, population distribution." He paused the recording at a specific frequency pattern. "This communication mentions preliminary harvesting zones, starting with our most densely populated cities." Dr. Novak's hands trembled slightly. "We're nothing but cattle to them." "Then let's play the part," Rice said, eyes glinting with determination. "Operation Trojan Horse begins now." Over the next month, Earth's military conducted ostentatious drills with outdated equipment, while the real defense preparations happened in secret Antarctic and lunar bases. The aliens were subtly guided to observe obsolete technology, while humanity's true advances remained hidden. When the time came to select Earth's trial team, Rice assembled individuals whose capabilities far exceeded their apparent qualifications. Zhang Wei was officially listed as a tactical consultant, rather than the architect of Earth's orbital defense grid. Sofia Novak was introduced as a theoretical physicist instead of the pioneer of quantum consciousness interfacing. Kwame Osei's groundbreaking work in xenobiology was deliberately omitted from his credentials. The Confederation provided a vessel for transport to the trials, the inevitable progress, which the humans accepted with apparent gratitude while covertly scanning every system and corridor. "They've placed monitoring devices in our quarters," Jean reported during their first night aboard. He spoke while running water in the washroom to mask their conversation. Audio, visual, and some form of neural activity sensors in the sleeping platforms. "Perfect," Reyes smiled. "Time for the performance of our lives." In their monitored areas, the team displayed technological dependence and occasional incompetence, struggling with alien interfaces and expressing awe at basic Confederation technology. Meanwhile, in the brief sensor shadows Zhang identified, they practiced with hidden equipment specifically designed for the trials ahead. 3 days before reaching the trial location, Hernandez intercepted a transmission to Confederation High Command. Human subjects demonstrate expected limitations. Minimal threat assessment confirmed. Harvesting authorization requested upon trial failure. That night, while the aliens believed them sleeping, the team gathered in a sensor blind spot within Zhang's quarters. "It seems our performance is convincing," Rice said quietly. "They expect us to fail spectacularly." Osei's expression was grim, "And when we don't?" Rice allowed herself a small, fierce smile. "That's when the real game begins." Nexus Prime loomed before them, a perfect sphere suspended in space, its surface a mesmerizing mosaic of geometric patterns that shifted subtly as the inevitable progress approached. Commander Rice felt her team's tension as the transport shuttle descended toward the artificial world. "Welcome to the first trial," announced Proctor Ziv Helene, a spindly representative of the Myriad Collective who seemed to float rather than walk. The labyrinth of deception tests cognitive adaptability, spatial reasoning, and problem-solving under pressure. The gathered competitors represented 17 species, each team wearing distinctive environmental suits. The Xilari, reptilian humanoids with iridescent scales, drew attention with their imposing stature and advanced equipment. Their team leader, Commander Sathvex, made a point of examining the humans with theatrical disdain. "Such primitive biosuits," he remarked loudly to his teammates. "One wonders if they understand the trial parameters at all." Dr. Novak averted her eyes, playing the intimidated scientist while her enhanced neural implant was already mapping energy fluctuations invisible to standard sensors. The teams were guided to separate entrances around the sphere's equator. Each portal led to the same labyrinth, a constantly reconfiguring maze that adapted to counter each team's approach. The objective was deceptively simple: reach the center within 12 hours. "Comms check," Rise whispered once they'd entered the pulsating corridor. The walls shimmered with a pearlescent light that made depth perception difficult. "I'm picking up something odd," Novik said, her eyes half closed as she processed the input from her synesthetic implant. "The energy patterns, they're responding to our thoughts, not just our movements." A grinding sound echoed behind them as the entrance sealed shut. Ahead, the corridor split into 3 identical paths. Standard procedure would be to split up, Zhang suggested loudly for the benefit of any monitoring devices. "Cover more ground." "No, we stay together," Rice countered, maintaining their appearance of caution. They had progressed barely 2 kilometers when disaster struck. The corridor suddenly flooded with a gaseous compound that corroded their equipment interfaces. Their mapping devices failed, environmental regulators fluctuated, and external communications went dead. "Sabotage," Zhang hissed, examining the molecular composition. "Xilari signature compounds." Hernandez smiled thinly. "They're so predictable." Rather than panic, the team shed their now useless external equipment. Beneath the compromised outer layer, each wore a secondary system, minimalist and undetectable to Confederation scans. "Now we can begin," Rice said. Novik sat cross-legged on the floor, entering a meditative state that enhanced her unique neurological condition. Through her synesthesia, the quantum fluctuations of the labyrinth appeared as cascading colors and patterns. "It's not physical," she whispered in amazement. "The entire labyrinth is a massive quantum simulation. The walls only appear solid because our minds interpret them that way." Osei connected his neural interface to Novik's. "The biological components in the walls. They're psychoreactive, like a massive, distributed brain." A revelation struck Hernandez. "They're not testing our technology. They're testing our minds." Reyes quickly formulated a plan. The team formed a circle, linking hands to create a neural feedback loop using their covertly implanted interfaces. Rather than trying to navigate the physical maze, they began projecting a unified mental construct, redirecting the quantum possibilities. Deep in the monitoring chamber, the Confederation observers watched in confusion as the humans stopped moving physically, but their signature within the labyrinth accelerated toward the center at impossible speed. "They're hacking the system," a technician exclaimed. "Impossible," Proctor Ziv Helene responded. "No species has ever recognized the quantum nature of the labyrinth on their first attempt." On the monitoring screens, the walls of the labyrinth began shifting not against the humans but with them, as if the maze itself had recognized them, as architects rather than participants. When the humans reached the center, in less than half the previous record time, several younger Confederation representatives broke into spontaneous applause, much to the horror of their elders. Sathvex, the Xilari commander, smashed his control panel. "Disqualify them. Their equipment was compromised." "By your sabotage," countered a Linari observer, her luminous eyes blinking rapidly. Which they overcame. The trial measures adaptability. They adapted. As the humans emerged from the labyrinth, Rise maintained her humble demeanor. Only those watching very closely would have noticed the slight, satisfied smile she shared with her team. The desert moon Karvosh hung like a scorched jewel against the gas giant it orbited. From the observation deck, Commander Rise studied the harsh landscape, endless rust-colored dunes broken only by jagged obsidian formations that jutted from the surface like the teeth of some ancient beast. Surface temperature averages 62 degrees Celsius during daylight, Jean reported. Nighttime brings it down to -20. Atmospheric composition is technically breathable, but the silicon particulates would shred unprotected lungs. Proctor Ziv Helene addressed the assembled teams, now reduced to 12 after the labyrinth had eliminated the weakest competitors. The combat trial tests survival, territorial control, and threat neutralization. Each team must establish and defend a base while capturing territory markers. "And the indigenous life forms?" asked Sathvex, the Salari commander whose hostility toward the humans had intensified after their unexpected success. "The Karvashian predators are part of the challenge," the proctor replied with a gesture that might have been a smile. "They hunt by detecting energy emissions, particularly from technology. Consider them motivation for efficiency." The teams were deployed to equidistant starting positions across the moon's equatorial region, each with basic supplies and a territorial beacon. The humans landed in a narrow canyon partially sheltered from the blistering sun. "Their surveillance capabilities will be limited here," Rise noted, scanning the rock walls. "Zhang, what do we know about these predators?" Before he could answer, a blood-curdling screech echoed through the canyon. Approximately 2 kilometers east, energy weapons flared in brilliant bursts against the darkening sky. "The Tari delegation," Hernandez whispered, monitoring communications. "They're being overwhelmed." Zhang accessed the tactical display projected from his wrist unit. "The predators are converging on energy signatures. The higher the output, the more they're attracted." "Then we go dark," Rice decided. "Minimal technology. Analog weapons only." The team shed their powered armor, retaining only passive environmental protection. Zhang produced handcrafted obsidian blades from his pack, weapons he'd designed based on ancient Earth techniques, with no electronic components. "Primitive, by Confederation standards," he said with a rare smile. "But effective." While other teams fortified their positions with energy shields and automated defense systems, drawing swarms of predators, the humans adopted the landscape's natural camouflage. They coated their suits with the rust-colored sand and moved only during the temperature transitions between day and night when the predators were less active. Their first encounter with a Karvashian hunter came at dusk. The creature, resembling a cross between an earth scorpion and mantis, standing 2 meters tall, stalked past their position, multiple sensory appendages waving. Zhang remained perfectly still, barely breathing, as it passed within centimeters of him. Instead of attacking, he observed its behavior, noting how it periodically pressed its appendages to the ground, as if tasting the soil. That night, the team implemented Zhang's strategy. They approached the nearest rival base, a Maikari outpost bristling with energy weapons. Rather than attacking directly, they gathered samples of soil from predator feeding grounds and scattered them around the outpost's perimeter. By dawn, the Maikari position had been overrun. The humans claimed their first territorial marker without firing a shot. "They're using the predators as weapons," Sathvex raged in the observation chamber. "This violates the spirit of combat. It demonstrates tactical adaptation," countered a Linari observer. "The trial measures combat effectiveness, not technology dependency." On the third day, the humans encountered something unexpected. A juvenile predator with an injured limb separated from its pack. Rather than avoiding or killing it, Osei approached carefully, applying a healing compound from their medical supplies. The creature's initial aggression faded to cautious acceptance. "They're social hunters," Osai realized, with hierarchical pack structures not unlike Earth wolves. By the 5th day, when the auxiliary force finally cornered the humans in a box canyon, Sath Vex was certain of victory. His elite warriors advanced with precision, energy weapons primed. "Your primitive tactics end here," he announced. Commander Reyes merely smiled and whistled, a sharp, piercing sound that echoed off the canyon walls. From the shadows emerged 6 Karavashian hunters, moving in coordinated formation with the humans. The auxiliary froze in disbelief, their advantage suddenly evaporated. Sometimes, Reyes called out, "The most advanced weapon is understanding." The floating cities of Kelthoria drifted serenely through the amber clouds of a gas giant. Each city platform was an architectural marvel. Crystalline spires and suspended gardens interconnected by translucent bridges that seemed impossibly delicate. Commander Reyes fought a wave of vertigo as their transport docked at the central diplomatic hub. Only 8 teams remained for the negotiation trial, and tension between the competitors had reached new heights after the combat phase. "The diplomatic trial requires finesse rather than force," Proctor Ziv Helene explained. "Each team must negotiate resource-sharing agreements with 5 client species. Success is measured by mutual benefit metrics." Mateo Hernandez would lead this phase, his linguistic abilities their greatest asset. As the teams dispersed to their assigned quarters, he noticed the Confederation stewards offering refreshments with peculiar deference. "Drink nothing they provide," he whispered to his teammates. "Something feels off about their hospitality." The first negotiation session began the following morning. The human team faced representatives from the Draveri, an avian species known for their complex social hierarchies. Halfway through the opening statements, Reyes felt an uncharacteristic surge of irritation. "Their proposals are insulting," she snapped, then immediately frowned at her own tone. Across the table, Osi's pupils had dilated unnaturally. Zhang's hands trembled with suppressed aggression. Only Hernandez seemed unaffected, though his expression revealed growing concern. During a brief recess, he pulled the team into an isolated alcove. "We've been drugged," he stated bluntly. "My neurochemistry is processing it differently due to my childhood trauma treatments, but you're all showing symptoms of increased aggression and impaired judgment." "The refreshments," Novak suggested, her voice tight with controlled anger. "More likely the air circulation," Hernandez countered. "Notice how the other teams are similarly affected. They're testing our ability to negotiate under biochemical influence." Reyes closed her eyes, focusing on her racing heartbeat. "I grew up in the New Pacific underwater habitats. We practiced breath control techniques for oxygen conservation." She demonstrated a slow, measured breathing pattern. "This might help stabilize our brain chemistry." The team adopted the technique, though the effects of the toxin still clouded their thoughts. As they returned to negotiations, Hernandez's enhanced linguistic perception detected subtle patterns in the Confederation observers' communications. "They're discussing dosage levels," he realized. "This is deliberate sabotage." Despite fighting the toxin's effects, the humans managed to complete negotiations with 3 client species by adapting their approach, using written proposals rather than verbal exchanges to minimize emotional reactions, and incorporating meditation breaks that the other competitors interpreted as weakness. During the 4th negotiation with the silicon-based Karathi, Reyes noticed a critical pattern. "The toxin levels increase whenever we approach beneficial agreement terms," she whispered to Hernandez. "They're actively adjusting the sabotage." Hernandez nodded grimly. "I've identified the compound from their communication frequencies. It's designed to trigger aggression centers in mammalian brains. Rather than fighting the effects directly, the team made a bold decision. They purposely exhibited symptoms of the toxin while following their actual negotiation strategy in writing. The Confederation observers, believing their sabotage effective, reduced the dosage, inadvertently giving the humans clearer minds. On the final day, facing the notoriously difficult Mevari delegation, Hernandez executed their masterstroke. He presented documentation of the systematic poisoning. including chemical analyses and recorded Confederation communications discussing the sabotage. "We would like to add this evidence to our proposed agreement terms," he announced calmly to the stunned Mavari. "In exchange for exclusive mining rights in your outer asteroid belt, we offer protection from similar Confederation manipulations in the future." The Mavari representative's translucent skin flushed with color patterns indicating shock, followed by calculation, and finally agreement. "Your terms are acceptable," they announced. "And most illuminating." In the observation chamber, Proctor Ziv Helene's assistants frantically attempted to terminate the broadcast as the evidence of sabotage was transmitted to all participating species. Several client species immediately demanded audience with their Confederation representatives. "The humans have violated protocol," Sath Vex roared. "No," countered the Linari observer. Her luminous eyes narrowed. "They negotiated effectively, despite deliberate interference. By definition, they've exceeded the trial parameters." As the diplomatic crisis unfolded, 3 client species formally requested direct relations with Earth, bypassing Confederation authority entirely. "It seems," Rise remarked to her team as they watched the chaos unfold, "that truth makes for powerful diplomacy." Voidreach deserved its ominous name. The planet hung in space like a malevolent eye, its atmosphere swirling with storms that shifted between Arctic blue and volcanic red as rapid climate changes swept across its surface. Only 5 teams remained for the final trial. "Survival is the purest test," Proctor Ziv Helene announced. "You will be deployed to separate locations with minimal supplies. Endure for 14 planetary cycles, establish sustainable operations, and return to your extraction points." What the Proctor didn't mention, but the human team had already discovered through Hernandez's intercepted communications, was that Voidreach served another purpose. It was a prison. As their drop pod plummeted through the turbulent atmosphere, Rise briefed her team on their secret objective. According to the encrypted files, something called the Void Walkers are contained on this planet. The Confederation considers them extinct officially, but their security protocols suggest otherwise. The pod crashed through a layer of ice clouds and deployed stabilizers barely 100 meters above the surface, landing on a frozen plain. Temperature readings showed -40 degrees Celsius, but the rapidly approaching storm front promised even worse conditions. "We have perhaps 3 hours before that system reaches us," Zhang assessed, studying the meteorological data. "We need shelter immediately." They quickly established a base camp beneath a rocky overhang, using the pod's thermal components to create a sheltered environment. As the storm intensified, howling winds carrying particles of ice and rock reduced visibility to 0. 18 hours later, when the storm finally subsided, they emerged to find the landscape completely transformed. The ice plain had melted into a steaming marsh dotted with geothermal vents. "The climate shifts are accelerating," Novik observed, consulting her instruments. "This isn't natural." On the 3rd day, their communications array failed without warning. Similar equipment failures began plaguing their shelter. Environmental regulators malfunctioned, water purifiers shut down, and navigation systems displayed impossible readings. "It's not mechanical failure," OC determined after examining the devices. "The power cells are being drained somehow, as if something is feeding on the energy itself." That night, as temperatures plummeted again, they huddled around a primitive fire of chemical fuel blocks. Novak had just closed her eyes for meditation when she gasped, sitting bolt upright. "There's something here," she whispered. "In the energy patterns. Watching us." Osei noticed it next, subtle distortions in the air around their shelter, like heat mirages, but moving with purpose. Using his enhanced vision implants, he tracked the patterns until he identified a distinctive formation hovering near their power generator. Rather than react with alarm, he calmly began a series of mathematical sequences, tapping them out with a stylus on a metal plate. Simple prime numbers at first, then more complex Fibonacci sequences. The distortion pattern shifted, approaching cautiously. It repeated the sequence, adding the next 5 numbers in the pattern. "It's intelligent," Reyes breathed. Using Novik's quantum interface and OSI's pattern recognition, they established rudimentary communication with the entity. Through mathematical exchanges and simple pictographs, a startling truth emerged. The Voidwalkers were energy beings that once controlled vast regions of space. When they refused to share their technology for manipulating quantum fields, the early Confederation had imprisoned them on Voidreach, a planet whose chaotic energy patterns made escape impossible. They're not predators, OSI explained. They've been consuming our technology because it's the only way they can communicate, temporarily incorporating our energy patterns into their consciousness. A new storm approached, but rather than seeking shelter, the humans followed their new ally directly into the maelstrom. Inside the swirling energy of the tempest, they encountered dozens of Voidwalkers, pulsating patterns of light and electricity that formed a community. Through their quantum interface, the humans proposed an alliance, helped surviving the planet's deadly environment in exchange for revealing the truth of their imprisonment to the galaxy. On the 8th day, when a massive electromagnetic storm threatened all the remaining teams, the Confederation observation satellites recorded something unprecedented. Streams of energy, seemingly directed by human guidance, formed protective barriers around competitor camps. The Voidwalkers, at humanity's request, were saving even their rivals. In the Confederation Command Center, Proctor Ziv Helene stared at the readings in horror. Impossible. They've made contact with the prisoners. The Lineary observer's luminous eyes widened. You told us the Voidwalkers were extinct. Some truths, Ziv Helene replied coldly, are not for sharing. The Lineary silently activated her personal communication device, transmitting the unfolding events to her government. The Confederation's web of secrets was beginning to unravel, one revelation at a time. The Grand Assembly Hall of the Confederation capital glittered with crystalline opulence, its vaulted ceilings displaying a real-time holographic map of controlled space, 17 major species, thousands of worlds, and uncounted client races. Commander Reyes and her team stood before the High Council, ostensibly to receive formal recognition for completing the trials. The atmosphere was tense. News of the Voidwalkers' existence had spread through diplomatic channels, despite the Council's efforts to suppress it. Representatives from younger Confederation species whispered among themselves, casting suspicious glances toward the 12 founding species councilors. High Councilor Vexmera, a descendant of the very Vexnar who had first contacted Earth, rose from the central dais. The human delegation has completed the qualification trials through unconventional means. We adapted to the challenges presented, Reyes replied evenly. Indeed. Vexmera's 4 eyes blinked in sequence, a sign of controlled anger. However, new evidence suggests Protocol Omega must be invoked. The hall erupted in murmurs. Hernandez leaned closer to Reyes. Protocol Omega, their legal mechanism for quarantining evolutionary threats. They're going to isolate Earth. Before Reyes could respond, security drones surrounded the human team, generating a containment field that cut them off from the assembly. As is procedure, Vexmera continued, the subjects will be detained while the council deliberates. The humans were escorted to a detention center deep within the capital station. Their quarters were luxurious but monitored by systems far beyond what they'd encountered previously. They've taken our communication devices and interfaces, John reported after sweeping their rooms. But they missed something. From a hidden compartment in his boot, he extracted a sliver of crystalline material, a fragment from the Voidwalkers. Novik cradled it carefully. It's still resonating with quantum patterns. I can potentially establish a limited connection. But to what end? Reyes studied the security arrangements. We need to access their historical archives. Throughout the trials, I've noticed inconsistencies in how they refer to Earth, as if there's something they're hiding. Using the Voidwalker crystal as a quantum bypass, Novik established a tenuous connection to the Confederation network. While the others created distractions to mask the energy signature, she delved into ancient records normally restricted even to council members. This is impossible, she whispered hours later, her face pale. According to these records, humans aren't newcomers to galactic society. Earth was once home to an advanced civilization called the progenitors. The team gathered around as she projected her findings. Archaeological data, genetic markers, and astronomical observations told a chilling story. Over 50,000 years ago, Earth had been the center of a flourishing civilization that embraced a philosophy of diversity and self-determination that threatened the early Confederation's control. They didn't just defeat them, Ose said, examining the genetic data. They engineered a targeted play that destroyed higher brain functions, reverting humans to a pre-technological state. They'd been monitoring our recovery ever since, waiting for the right moment to harvest us, Zhang added grimly, before we could rediscover our past. The evidence was irrefutable. The Confederation had committed genocide against humanity's ancestors and concealed the truth for millennia. While the team processed this revelation, an unexpected visitor arrived. The Lineary observer who had supported them throughout the trials. "I am Ambassador Liz," she said, deactivating the room's surveillance with a device on her wrist. "My government finds the Council's actions troubling. Your trial broadcasts have sparked debate throughout Confederation space. Many question why a species that demonstrated such remarkable adaptability and ethical behavior should be feared. They fear what we might remember," Rice replied. Liz's luminous eyes blinked rapidly. "Perhaps. But know this, you are not without allies. The trial before you tomorrow is merely theater. The decision to implement Protocol Omega was made before you arrived. Then we'll need to change the script," Rice said, her mind racing through possibilities. "Ambassador, how many species would support an appeal to the full assembly rather than just the Council?" "At least 5 have expressed concerns." "Why?" Rice smiled thinly. "Because tomorrow, the Confederation will learn that humanity hasn't just been participating in their trials." She glanced at her team. "We've been conducting our own." The trial chamber hushed as Commander Rice and her team entered. Above them, observation galleries filled with representatives from across Confederation space, drawn by rumors of the controversial proceedings. The High Council occupied the elevated judiciary platform, their expressions impassive. "This special tribunal will determine the application of Protocol Omega regarding species Terra 3, High Counselor Vex Mera announced. "Evidence indicates this species represents an evolutionary divergence that threatens established galactic order." Ray stepped forward. "Before these proceedings continue, I formally request the right of full assembly appeal, as guaranteed by the Founding Charter, Section 12. Vex Mera's outer eyes narrowed. "That provision applies only to member species. Then we invoke the rights of the progenitors," Rice countered. "Unless the Council wishes to formally deny our genetic heritage." A ripple of murmurs spread through the chamber. The Council members exchanged alarmed glances. "The humans are delusional," Sath Vex declared from his position as witness. "They have no evidence of such lineage." "On the contrary," Rice replied calmly. She nodded to Novak, who activated a small projector. The chamber darkened as ancient star charts materialized above the proceedings, navigational data from Confederation archives alongside genetic markers and archaeological findings. The evidence was damning, showing deliberate manipulation of human development and systematic erasure of Earth's true history. "We did not come to these trials unprepared," Rice continued as the evidence unfolded. "While we participated in your evaluations, Earth conducted its own assessment of the Confederation." She activated her communication band, which suddenly functioned despite the security protocols. "Captain Rivera, your status." A new voice filled the chamber. "ESS Pathfinder fleet in position, Commander. Stealth systems disengage." The holographic displays throughout the capital flickered, showing dozens of Earth vessels emerging from stealth positions throughout the system. They had shadowed the human team from the beginning, a contingency plan that even the Confederation's vaunted detection systems had missed. The Council chamber erupted in chaos. Security forces moved to apprehend the human team, but froze as pinpoints of light, appeared throughout the room. Voidwalkers, their energy signatures unmistakable. "We did not come seeking war," Rise announced over the din. "We came seeking truth." The Confederation began with noble intentions: unity, mutual protection, advancement. But somewhere across the millennia, it became about control rather than cooperation. The chamber stilled, captivated despite the tension. "Humanity does not wish to destroy the Confederation," she continued. "We wish to transform it, not through conquest, but through choice." Ambassador Tayles stepped forward. "The Lineary Ascendancy supports the human position and calls for an immediate vote of no confidence in the High Council." One by one, representatives from younger species rose in support. 5, then 12, then more, until over half the assembly stood with the humans. 3 weeks later, representatives from across known space gathered on Earth. The diplomatic summit took place not in sterile government facilities, but across the planet's diverse regions, from the rebuilt coral cities of the New Pacific to the desert reclamations of the Sahara Cooperative. The visitors witnessed something unprecedented in their experience: a world of diverse cultures, governments, and ideologies functioning without centralized control. Cities that had developed unique solutions to environmental challenges. Communities that celebrated differences rather than enforcing uniformity. "This is the core of what we propose," Rise explained to the assembled delegates as they stood beneath the open sky of the Tanzania highlands. The Phoenix Covenant, named for Earth's mythical bird that rises renewed from its own ashes. Not an empire, but a symbiosis of civilizations. The principles spread rapidly, particularly among younger species long chafing under Confederation restrictions. What emerged was not dominance but transformation. Societies adopting elements of Earth's approach while maintaining their unique evolutionary paths. Centuries later, a woman with Rise's eyes stood on the bridge of the exploration vessel Phoenix as it approached the edge of the galaxy. Behind her, the crew represented dozens of species, former enemies now colleagues. "Contact established with extra-galactic signals," her first officer reported. "They're requesting identification." Captain Alina Reyes-Zhang smiled at the echo of history. "Tell them we are the Phoenix Covenant. Many worlds, many species, one future. And we come in peace." On the view screen, representatives of an entirely new civilization prepared to meet them. The cycle of first contact would begin again, but this time, with truth as its foundation.